Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I want to explain the top 3 mistakes that most new houseplant owners make and how you can avoid them. Stick around and I'll explain everything. Alrighty then, so the first mistake that most new houseplant parents make when bringing their houseplant home is what I'm going to call helicopter parenting. You know, the type always hovering over their child. Well, the same goes for a new houseplant. It's going to be a novelty, it's probably going to look amazing, and you're probably going to be really pleased with it, which is great. You can't stop looking at it. You put it in the pride of place in your home, awesome. But there is such a thing as too much, and quite often the temptation will be to kill it with kindness. Give it a little water when you look at it, maybe give it a bit of plant food, maybe move it somewhere else into some daylight and then move it somewhere else, and just be constantly doing something to it. And the thing is with houseplants is things happen a little bit slower, and so you think you're helping, but quite often you're doing the opposite. So regular watering is not helpful. In fact, what actually happens is you give it too much and it can't use, even if you're putting a little bit, if you do it often, it's not taking on that water and it builds up in the soil. And if the soil's not perfectly well draining, which it often isn't when it comes from a nursery, it will build up, and then you've got a problem of the roots rotting in the soil. And then once the roots start to rot, the plant's only going to go one way, and that's downhill. So my first suggestion to you, if you're new for owning a houseplant and you're enjoying it, is to maybe enjoy it from a distance or just appreciate it without doing stuff to it. I know the temptation is there. You want to be involved in its care, but I would leave it to once a week to begin with. Get to know the plant. And the first thing you can really do if you want to get involved in its care is to look up a care guide on YouTube or buy a houseplant book and look up how to care for that specific plant that you've bought. Sit on your hands for a little while and just enjoy your houseplant. Now, in terms of watering, you do obviously have to water your plant, but firstly find out whether they want more or less water from the care guide. If it's an average amount of water, which the majority is, what you want to do is water well and then leave it alone for it to nearly dry out before you water it again. Okay, so a way to check this is just put your finger down into the soil. It's like the standard way of doing it and has been for many years. Just stick your finger in and see if it's any sort of wetness or moisture that you can detect on your finger by sticking it down in the soil. If you look at it on the surface, that dries out quickest anyway. So it could be dry on the surface, but just underneath the surface it could still be moist. And in fact, you won't need to water it in that if that's the case. If you stick your finger in a good inch down into the soil and it is completely dry under there, then you know that a good portion of the soil has dried out. If you want to be 100% sure and you're still not 100%, you can buy yourself a houseplant water meter or moisture meter. And what that has is a long prong. You can stick it down into the soil, right the way down into the middle, and it will have a gauge saying dry, medium, and wet. And that will tell you exactly when you need to water your plant. If it stays wet or somewhere in the middle, it's still okay. And once it just starts to get to the dry side, then you can water it again. So I can't say do this once a week. I can't say do this twice a week, because it really depends on the climate that you're keeping your plant. Is it winter? Is it summer? How warm is it in the environment there? The humidity, that will really determine on how much water you need to give your plant at any given time. So if it's winter, the plant's going to be hardly taking on any extra water, which means it's not going to be using it, so you need to water less. In the summer, when the sun is beaming in and it's actively growing, it's going to be taking up more water. You need to water it more often. So let the plant tell you when it gets drier and the pot is starting to feel lighter, and you stick your finger in and it's drying out quicker, then water it. But what I would say is check it once a week to begin with, And if it's always dry every time, then check it twice a week and just get to know the plant. Just keep an eye on it. At the beginning anyway, you're going to be fairly happy with the plant and you're going to be enjoying looking at the plant. So take that opportunity just to check with your finger in the pot and see every few days, how's it getting on. If it's still moist, leave it alone. And then after a while, you'll probably get a gist like once a week is probably enough for this house plant at this time of year. Fine. All you need to do is keep an eye on it. A day or so either way doesn't make a huge difference. It doesn't change that much because the plant will still be taking up moisture and holding moisture in its leaves. So if it just gets to the point where the pot has dried out, you could still leave it another day in most situations because the plant has water in its leaves, and then water it again. So a day or so either way, unless it's the hottest time of year and it's actually getting sun baking on it, in which case it's probably not in the best position anyway. But you don't have to be exactly precise, but you'll generally, through experience and through time, you'll get used to knowing when to water it. But the key is a little bit less often than you think, because it's very much easy in the early stages to water it more often, and you cause more trouble doing that than you will letting it dry out a little and then giving it a good water afterwards. So the second mistake is putting your new houseplant where it looks nice and not exactly where it gets the amount of light that it needs. So when you see your new houseplant in the nursery or the houseplant store, you might be thinking, I know exactly where I'm going to put that in my house. It's going to look amazing on my dining room table. So you buy it and you take it home and you put it there, and it does look amazing, I'm sure. But it all depends on the type of houseplant and the type of light requirements it needs. So if you've got a space on your dining room table but it is actually quite a long way from a window, and the plant that you bought likes a light, bright position with lots and lots of natural sunlight for a good amount of the day, then it's not going to thrive if it's several meters back from a window in a much more shady position in your house. So remember, you need to put the plant where the plant is happy rather than the way it looks good for you. It sounds kind of counterproductive, but if you're wanting your plant to do well and thrive, you have to think about the care of your houseplant first. Now, if you want something that looks good on the table, maybe keep it in the area where it has plenty of light, and then if you have company, you can take it there and put it where you want it for decorative purposes for a day, no problem at all. But generally, you need to keep it where it's going to get the right amount of light. Now, it might be that you can buy a houseplant that prefers a lesser amount of daylight, and maybe you can keep it there. But it's important to find the right plant for the right spot, because if a plant likes high light and likes a really strong amount of light, and you put it in an area which gets hardly anything, it's just never going to do well. It might survive, but there's a big difference between a plant that survives and a plant that thrives. And that's the difference between successful houseplant ownership, where you've got plenty of green leaves, plenty of flowers, whatever it is, on a really luscious looking plant with plenty of new growth, and a plant that's hardly growing and the leaves are wilting, maybe just looking a little bit sick and a little bit lackluster. And the difference is it's not getting enough light. And to be honest with you, I would say light is probably one of the biggest things. You can have a plant that's a little bit cooler than it would like and it's still going to be okay. And you can have a plant that has a little bit less water than it likes, but it's still going to be okay. But if you give it a plant that doesn't have as much light as it likes, then it's really going to struggle with that, because that's how it makes its energy and that's how it is able to successfully grow. So the second mistake is not giving the plant the right light requirements. So once again, look up a care guide on YouTube. I have plenty of them in the care guides playlist. You can look that up on my channel. Subscribe for more of those on a regular basis. But generally, search on YouTube, you'll find a care guide and you'll be able to find out how much light it needs, how much water, and how often to feed it. And then you're going to get the best chance to look after your plant and give it the best chance to really look the best in your home as well. So for the third mistake, it may sound obvious, but not feeding your houseplant is the third mistake that most new houseplant owners make. Now, some of you would say, why would I forget to do that? But if you're a new houseplant owner, many people ask me for advice on their suffering houseplant. Why is it not doing so well? And I'd say to them, it looks like it's undernourished. When was the last time you fed it? And the answer that quite often comes back is, oh, I didn't know I needed to do that. So I'm just putting that one out there as mistake number 3, that you do have to feed your houseplants. When you get it from the nursery, where it's been raised, it will have had loads and loads of nutrients to make it look as good as it possibly can. And if you bring it back, okay, if it's the winter, don't worry, it's not going to be growing very much unless you live in a hot country where it's hot all the time, in which case it's growing all the time. But generally, if it's the winter, it slows down or goes dormant. Don't need to feed your plant. But in spring, summer and autumn, that's the growing period for your house plant. It needs food, light and water to be able to thrive. And if you've got the right amount of watering down and you've got it in the right amount of light for that house plant, that's great, but it needs the food. It's in a pot, which is really, if you think about it, a sterile environment. It hasn't got its roots in the ground where there is constantly decomposing matter to feed the soil, and worms going in there and sort of breaking things down and creating food in the soil. It's an organic environment, but in a pot, there's no way more food can go in there until you put it in there. But don't forget, it does need food. And also the other thing is, more isn't necessarily better. If you put extra in, it doesn't give you extra plants and extra leaves. You can overdo it, as you can with watering and as you can with light. Just the right amount is better. And if anything, with the liquid feed, more dilute and more often is probably better than a really big whack of a strong amount of food at one time, because it can only take up a certain amount in the roots. So something to think about. If you haven't actually realized that and you're new to keeping house plants, it's something you really need to consider. Water, light, food. All right, so I've got a bonus mistake for you. I said I've got 3, and I've just thought of another one which makes 4, but it doesn't sound as good, does it? My top 4 mistakes. So I'm going to give you a bonus one, and that is the romance is over mistake. Okay, so that might happen 3 months time, 4 months time, 6 months time. You've had your house plant, you've seen it there, you've enjoyed it, and you've watered it and you've cared for it, but now you've walked past it maybe 700 times on your way in and out of the house, and slowly and slowly and slowly you just forget it's there. You almost take it for granted, and at some point, alas, the romance will be over, and maybe you might start forgetting about your house plant. You might forget to water it, you might forget to feed it or check on it or anything like that. And that's the problem which happens to a lot of new owners, that it's such a novelty to begin with. You lavish it with care to begin with, too much care sometimes, but then later on down the line, life gets in the way. You go on holiday and you forget to do something about it when you go on holiday, and then you come back and you've got a limp mess of dried up leaves because you forgot maybe to create a solution to keep it watered throughout the time when you're on holiday. Or maybe life's just got in the way and you haven't looked over there for a while and you forgot to water it. So what you can do about that is maybe think about your houseplant a bit often. Create a habit is the best way to do it. Maybe on a Sunday morning, you're mooching around the house, you've got a little bit of downtime. Create a habit of looking over all your houseplants once a week. Just check them over. Have a look at the leaves. Are there any pests on there? How's the watering levels? Do I need to add a bit more? When was the last time I fed it? Right, maybe I need to feed it again now. Just create a habit is the best way you can do it. Whatever works with your schedule, whether that's a Monday morning or Wednesday afternoon or a Sunday morning or a Sunday afternoon, create a certain time where you can spend some time with your houseplants. It's a nice experience if you can just be in the moment with your plants, just taking even 10 minutes out of your day just to spend a bit of quiet time, checking out your houseplants, seeing if they need anything, and just enjoy them. Just take a moment, and I think you really will find that quite rewarding. So that pretty much wraps it up for this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you found it useful. Subscribe for more houseplant related videos coming along very soon. Bye for now.